Okay. So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our TNC Access for All Advice Letter Process and Reporting Requirement training session today, despite these challenging times. I am Anna Ju, lead analyst for the TNC Access for All proceeding. Also joining us today is my colleague, Reagan Roxford, who is also an analyst working on this proceeding, and Cody Naylor, supervisor of the Transportation Analysis section. So before we begin our presentation, I wanted to go over some housekeeping rules. This presentation is being conducted and recorded through WebEx. To limit disruptions during the presentation, the phone lines will be on mute for the duration of the presentation. We will be monitoring the chat box, so if you have difficulties in seeing our slides or hearing us, please tell us in the chat box. Also, feel free to type your questions in the chat box and we'll get to those questions at the end of the presentation. The slide deck, along with the forms and templates that we'll be going over in today and a recording, if the quality is acceptable, will be posted on the CPUC's TNC Access website. And finally, if you have any additional questions after the training, feel free to contact TNC Access at cpuc.ca.gov. The purpose of today's presentation is to provide you with a step-by-step instructions for filing advice letters. We will address the types of documents that are required, how to file or respond to a protest, responses, and replies, and we'll also have a Q&A at the end.
Hello, everyone. This is Reagan Roxford. In the first part of our presentation, we will go over step-by-step instructions for filing advice letters and supplements. Decision 20-03007 adopted advice letter process as the right avenue to submit, review, and dispose offsets, retroactive, and exception requests. Although there are no industry-specific rules for transportation under General Order 96B, transportation is very similar to other industries in many aspects. The general rules under 96B governing advice letter, however, are much broader in scope and applicable to all industries. Decision 20-03007 adopted advice letter process under the general rules with some modifications and established that ministerial review and disposition of advice letters by CPED is appropriate. One of the key modifications is limiting protests and responses to parties in rulemaking 19-02012 or any success proceedings. And so therefore, TNCs need only serve their advice letter to the service list in this proceeding or any successor proceedings. As you can see in this slide, it gives you a quick overview of the advice letter process. It starts with TNC preparing and submitting the advice letter via email. And then there is a 20-day protest period. CPED will start the review, and we have 30 days to review the advice letter. If we recommend to accept the advice letter, we will forward any offset or retroactive amount request to fiscal to process the payment, and then the TNC will receive the payment. For offset, once we approve the offset amount, the TNC will then remit that payment back to us. So before we begin, let's go over some advice letter basics. So advice letter, or we will call it AL or for short, is an informal request by a carrier for CPUC approval outside of a formal proceeding. It provides a quick and simplified review of issues that are not controversial or those that don't raise important policy questions. The requirements for advice letters, as I said, is outlined in general rules under General Order 96B with modifications mentioned in Decision 20-03007. Couple of important points. Advice letter must be served to the R19-02012 service list. Parties can protest, reply, or respond to any advice letter, and TNCs can start filing advice letter between the 1st and the 15th day after each quarter ends. And as I said, initial review is 30 days from the date of filing. Generally, a complete advice letter has 4 key components. So we have a summary form, cover letter, service list, and supporting documents. The access for all program requires significant amount of supporting documents, which we will cover in this presentation. We just want to remind you that in order for us to fully review the advice letter on time as well as properly, it is important to ensure that they are complete and included in every filing. The first step of the filing process is preparing the advice letter, which involves 4 sub-steps. Please note that supplemental filings follow the same steps as original advice letters. Let's start with completing the advice letter summary form. As you can see in this slide, we included the actual sample of the form. The first important point here is that advice letters must be filed sequentially. And for supplements, they must be filed sequentially as well, but in alphabetical order. So for example, for the first advice letter, if you look at the advice letter number space in the form, we put number 1 to signify that it is the first advice letter. If it's a supplement, for advice letter number 1, you should affix letters A, B to C, significant order. So for example, your first supplement must be numbered as 1A. Just a quick discussion on supplements. They are filing to make major revisions or minor revisions as well, or corrections to advice letter filing. CPD can request additional info related to advice letter, and such new information should be filed as supplements. Changes that generally can be made through supplements include a correction of typographical or any insubstantial error, or any language clarification, or even changing the effective date of the advice letter.
In addition to the summary form, each filing will need to include a cover letter. The purpose of a cover letter is to let CPUC staff know what the advice letter is requesting. It's important to make sure that the cover letter includes the required elements, which I'll go over in the following slide. And failure to include all the required elements may result in rejection of the advice letter filing. So here's a copy of a sample cover letter. Feel free to develop your own as long as you have the required elements in the letter. The required cover sheet elements pursuant to GO 96B are submission date, brief advice letter description of what you're requesting, CPUC authority for filing, effective date. So for these filings, the effective date will be 30 days after the carrier files, date advice letter served to parties, and protest and response filing language. So the expenditures table you see on the left side was copied from the claim form, which I'll go over later in the presentation. And as mentioned earlier, this template will be posted online. The next step is obtaining the TNC access service list, which is Rulemaking 1902-012. Pursuant to GO 96B, advice letters must be served to the appropriate service list. You can easily obtain the TNC access service list by accessing them from the CPUC website shown here. You'll then select the appropriate list. Once you select the list, the names of individuals and relevant parties will be shown. You download the list, which you will serve the advice letter filing to via email and then save it as a PDF file to include in your filing. Next, we're going to go over the supporting documents. Depending the type of request, the supporting documents will be different. Each of the requests, however, will include two types of documents. There are data reporting and signed forms and declarations. If you're filing a supplement, it'll depend on what is being supplemented. And Reagan will go over the required documents for supplement filing later in the presentation. Apologies for the small font, but this is a summary of all the required documents when submitting for retroactive and offset or exemptions, as well as submitting the quarterly reports. Looking at the leftmost column, we're going to walk through each one of these elements so you'll have a better understanding of what supporting data or forms and what type of format are required for each submittal. Also, the highlighted colors you see corresponds to the colors on the templates, which I'll be showing you so it's easier to follow. So going down the list so far, we've gone over the advice letter summary form and cover letter. We're next going to switch over to show you the data templates as well as the forms mentioned here.
This is Reagan again. So I'll be talking about the first set of templates that are required to be submitted with the advice letter filing. So the first data reporting requirement under Decision 20-03007 is the presence and availability of drivers of wheelchair accessible vehicles or WAVs. So the first part of this requirement is to report the number of WAVs in operation by quarter and aggregated by the hour of the day and the day of the week by geographic area, as you can see in this template on the screen. So in operation is defined as when a WAV is available to receive a trip request and also has accepted the trip request until the passenger exits the vehicle or until the trip request is no longer accepted. So for example, if a WAV was available to receive a trip request from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. on a Tuesday, or let's say on a Monday, then that WAV should be counted as one WAV in operation in each hour from 1 to 6 p.m. So in other words, the WAV should be counted 6 times during that time period. The second part is to report the number of WAV trips completed, not accepted, canceled by passenger, canceled due to passenger no-show, and canceled by driver. And these type of trips should be reported by quarter and aggregated by hour of the day and day of the week. So what we basically want to see is the total number of these times, these events happen per hour by the day of the week across each geographic area in a specific quarter. For wave trips completed, count the trip to the hour when the passenger is dropped off, not when the passenger is picked up. For example, if a passenger is picked up at 10:45 a.m. and dropped off at 11:05 a.m., that wave trip should be counted to the 1100 hour and not on the 10 hour. So for wave trips not accepted, count the trip to the hour when the request was not accepted. For example, if a wave trip was requested at 13:25 and not accepted at 13:30 or 1:30 p.m., then that request should be counted to the 1300 hour. The first, or if you see the gray, we pre-filled those as samples. The row in gray, just to show you what the data might look like. But then again, you will fill this out with your actual data. And feel free to remove that row where there is a gray sample data. Moving to wave trips canceled by passenger, count the trip to the hour when the request was canceled, not when the request was made. For example, if a wave trip was requested at 3:55 p.m., but passenger canceled at 4:01 p.m., that trip request should be counted to the 1600 or to the 4 p.m. hour. For wave trips canceled due to no-show, count the trip to the hour when the request was canceled and not when the request was made or when the driver accepted the request. So for example, if a wave trip was requested at 3:55 and the driver accepted at 3:59, but then the driver canceled at 4:01 due to no-show, then that trip request should be counted to the 4 o'clock hour. And finally, for wave trips canceled by driver, count the trip to the hour when the accepted request was canceled by the driver and not when the request was made or when the driver accepted the request. For example, if it was requested at 13 or 3:15 and accepted at 3:20, but canceled at 3:25, that request should still be counted to the 3 o'clock hour. All these types of trips are also required to be reported as percentage of total trips by hour of the day and day of the week by geographic area. So for wave trips completed in, let's say, hour X as a percentage of the total trips in hour X, you would calculate it. I mean, for instance, it's pretty simple, but in this case, you would calculate it as the number of wave trips completed in hour X, for example, at 1 o'clock p.m., and then you divide that by the total trips in that hour, which is 1 p.m. And where total trips is the total of trips either completed, trips not accepted, trips canceled by passenger, plus trips canceled due to no-show, plus trips canceled by driver in hour X. So, for example, in this template you see in the screen, so let's just use the 7 o'clock a.m. example there. So you would calculate the percentage of trips completed for 7 o'clock by dividing the total trips completed at 7 o'clock by the total trips for that hour. And total trips are a combination or a summation of completed trips and canceled trips. And the concept is the same for the other types of rides. So I'm not going to go through them one by one, but basically they're the same for wave trips completed, wave trips not accepted, wave trips canceled, no show, and wave trips canceled by passenger, and wave trips canceled by driver as well. So let's go over response times data reporting. Offset, retroactive, and exemption requests have different response time standards. However, the definition for response times is the same for all three types. So response time is the time elapsed between when a wave ride was requested and when the vehicle arrived and should be reported in decile, by geographic area, by quarter. In addition, periods A and B, which are just breakdowns of the overall response time, must also be reported in decile, by geographic area, by quarter. So period A is defined as the time elapsed from when the trip is requested until the trip is accepted, while period B is defined as the time elapsed from when a trip is accepted until the vehicle arrives. And 07, if you see in the screen, it was just an example calculation of response time, and so that's how you would report it in minutes by decile. And the first, under column B, you would then identify which level you are complying to or submitting for. So it's either level 1 or level 2. In the sample, we're satisfying level 2, and the corresponding examples are on that row. And this is by quarter as well. For retroactive response time, the format is the same. However, there's no response time standards for retroactive requests, but you would also report response time in decile, by geographic area, by quarter that you are requesting retroactive offset for. And finally, for exemption request, the response time standards is 80% of all completed wave trips. The formatting is the same as well. Report the response times, both including both periods A and B in decile, across geographic area, by quarter.
Okay, so next we're going to go over the outreach efforts. So to demonstrate in a geographic area, efforts undertaken to publicize and promote available WAVE service to disability communities. The TNCs will be required to list the name or names of the entities they collaborated with, the method of outreach, such as social media, the date of when the outreach started, and identify Y for yes or N for no if any marketing materials will be included in the advice letter packet to support the efforts. We also included some examples highlighted in gray. Okay, so next we're going to go over the training and inspections. So all TNCs are to report the WAVE driver training programs used in that geographic area and the number of WAVE drivers that completed WAVE training in that quarter. In addition, TNCs are required to provide certification for their driver training and inspection, which I will go over next. Again, as mentioned, all these documents, including all forms shown today, will be posted on the CPUC's TNC Access website for you to download. So this is the declaration form that will need to be included in the advice letter submitted to certify that all of your WAVE drivers have completed at minimum the following: sensitivity training, passenger assistance techniques, accessibility equipment use, door-to-door service, and safety procedures within the past 3 years. All TNCs are also required to certify that all WAVE operating in their platform have been inspected and improved to conform with the ADA within the past year. Now, if for some reason you're not able to provide a certification from a third party, an original letter from an approved vehicle modifier indicating that the modifications done to the vehicle have been in accordance with ADA regulations and specification, and that the vehicle is considered a wheelchair accessible vehicle in compliance with all applicable ADA specifications and requirements will satisfy this requirement. So going back to the Excel, the TNCs will need to indicate Y for yes or N for no if the declarations are included in the advice letter packet. Next, we're going to go over complaints reporting. Each TNC requesting for a retroactive offset, exemptions, or filing quarterly reports will need to provide the number of complaints related to WAVE drivers or WAVE services by quarter and by geographic area. Here we also included some examples highlighted in gray. So each TNC is required to provide the number of complaints categorized as follows: type of securement issues, driving training, vehicle safety and comfort, service animal issue, and identify any other complaints that wasn't listed. In addition, the TNCs will need to identify the numbers of complaints that were resolved and the number of complaints that are still pending by the end of the quarter. Okay, so next to demonstrate, so to demonstrate a full accounting of funds expended, a TNC shall submit sufficient detail of their expenses and to verify how the funds were expended and the amount expended for each item. Now, no invoices is needed at this time, but the TNCs should retain them for the duration of the program in cases where we request them. Here we provided some examples shown in gray for each of the categories. So for instance, under lease rental for that 1 quarter, for example, my company spent $1,500. How were the funds expended? Well, I leased one wave, which cost $500 per month, and my company also put a down payment. One thing to note is that whatever expenses you include here, it'll carry over to the following 2 tabs: the funds expended, certification, and the claim form. So let me show you what I mean. So as you can see here to test it, we've inputted $100 under lease purchase and $100 under rental subsidies for Alameda. And we've also inputted $500 under lease rental for Alpine. Now moving on to the next tab, you'll see it already totaled all the expenditures for all counties collectively in that quarter. Now this is a form, it should be pretty familiar with everyone as it was part of the appendix in the decision. This form is required for all TNCs certifying to the accuracy of its accounting practices. There's really not a lot of work here for you except to replace the red font up on top, include the info at the bottom, print, sign, and include this form as a PDF with the filing. Next, I'm going to go over the claim form. So as you can see under Alameda and Alpine, the expenses that we had inputted in the funds expended tab earlier has pre-populated here. But instead of summing the total expenditures for all counties collectively in the previous tab, the claims worksheet breaks down total expenditures by county separately. Now all you need to do at this point is replace the red font up on top, include the info at the bottom, print, sign, and include this form as a PDF with the filing. You can also include these tables with the advice letter cover, which I showed you at the beginning of the presentation. So it was this entire table. Now it's important to include a signed PDF of this claim with the submittal of the advice letter to help expedite the payment process once staff approves the advice letter. The claims will only be needed for retroactive offset for Q3 and Q4 of 2019, and if there ever happens to be a delay. For example, when a TNC appeals staff's decision on the advice letter, the TNC will need to first remit the quarterly fee while the TNC and CPD staff work to solve the pending issues. And then after both parties are in agreement, the TNC will need to file a claim to get reimbursed for what has already been remitted. But typically, a claim form is not needed for offset since the TNC can simply submit a delayed access fee to offset the remittance. Now I'm going to go over the STD 204 form. So in order to receive any payment from CPUC, all carriers are required to complete this form so payments can be sent to the proper company and to the correct mailing address. Not sure how familiar you are regarding payments here at the CPUC, but refunds or reimbursements are typically not issued from CPUC directly. They are usually issued from the State Controller's Office, also known as SCO, but regardless of where the check is being issued from, every carrier will be assigned a vendor ID number, and that's how SCO and CPC will use to identify the company. So it's very important if a carrier changes its mailing address, for example, that they'll need to resubmit this form with the correct mailing address for TNCs who are thinking of requesting a retroactive offset for Q3 or Q4 of 2019. Because the process of getting reimbursed will be through a claims process, and it takes time to set up the accounting for individual carriers. And therefore, I highly recommend you fill it out ASAP and provide a signed copy to tncaccess@cpuc.ca.gov so our fiscal office can start setting it up. Again, this form will be posted on the website. Okay. Let me see. Okay. So that pretty much completes the list of required documents shown here. So just to quickly recap, depending on the type of request or even filing quarterly reports, make sure you have all the required documents in the format specified listed here. So for example, looking at quarterly reporting requirement, advice letter or summary form is not checked because the quarterly report is an information filing only and does not require an advice letter, but will need a signed cover letter. Next, we'll go over how to package the filing.
Once the advice letter components are complete and ready, to recap, those components are the summary form, cover letter, service list, and the supporting documents. The next step is ensuring that documents follow the filing requirements for easy tracking and identifications once we receive those filings. So there are 6 requirements to check before filing the advice letter. Each of these requirements applies to both the original advice letter and supplemental filings. So the first filing requirement is PDF Excel formatting. As the slide shows, the following 8 PDF documents must be combined into a single PDF file, while all the data reporting templates must be in a single Excel file as they are now. So at the end, there will only be 2 file attachments with the advice letter, the PDF packet on the left side and the Excel packet on the right side. The second filing requirement is file naming convention. The 2 main files created in step 2.1 must be named using the following conventions. So for an original advice letter filing, for the PDF packet, please name it as the 5-digit TCP number, the TNC name, the advice letter number, and the word forms. So for example, 12345 XYZ advice letter number 1 forms. And for the Excel packet, just add the word or replace the word forms with the word data at the end. And this naming convention will help us identify these files internally once we receive the filings. For supplement, the naming conventions are the same, except that add the word supplement at the end to signify that the documents are for supplemental filing. So for example, for a PDF packet, name it as 12345 XYZ for the TNC name, AL1A signifying it's your first supplement, and supplement forms. And it's the same format with the Excel packet, but signify that it's the Excel packet by adding the word data at the end. The third filing requirement is PDFA compliance, which ensures long-term archiving and reproduction of PDF documents. If you haven't dealt with this before, we included links to ensure that your documents are PDFA compliant. So just follow these links if you are either using Adobe or Nitro, and to ensure that all PDF documents submitting with the advice letter are PDFA compliant.
The fourth filing requirement is to follow the file size limit. The maximum attachment size is 5 megabytes per email. Files greater than 5 megabytes should be sent via the CPUC Secured File Transfer Protocol, also known as SFTP. To set up an account, or if you already have one, the links here will guide you how to use it. It's not likely to happen, but that you'll exceed 5 megabytes, but the SFTP is there just in case. The next filing requirement is email subject format. For original advice letter filing, the email subject format must follow this order: TNC name and the advice letter number. For supplemental filing, the format is the same as original filing above. The only difference is you must add the letter to the advice letter number to signify the order of the supplements. So it'll be TNC, name, advice letter number, letter, and supplements. So here's an example of the final advice letter filing email. So you'll need to include the subject of the advice letter filing in the email body, as well as the contact person for filing questions.
Once the advice letter components have been prepared and all the filing requirements have been satisfied, the advice letter is ready to be filed electronically via email. So as I mentioned, the advice letter filing must only have 2 attachments when you send the filing to us. So we have the PDF packet, which composed of 8 documents, and the Excel packet, which is only consists of all the data reporting templates. So once you have all the documents ready, email the original advice letter or any supplemental filing to CPED at tncaccess@cpuc.ca.gov and to the appropriate service list, which is, in this case, all the parties in rulemaking are 19-02012. So the cutoff time to be considered filed the same day as submitted is 5 p.m. Pacific. And filings received by CPED after 5 p.m. or on any non-business day will be considered filed the following business day. And also, once you submit the advice letter, an automatic confirmation email from us will be received by your company.
So now we will quickly recap the advice letter filing process. So after preparing the advice letter packet, you want to ensure the entire filing complies with advice letter submission formatting and size requirements. You can look at the checklist we presented earlier in this presentation to make sure you have all the documents in the correct format for that specific request. You would then email the advice letter to CPED and the service list. Okay, so this is just a heads up of what's due in the upcoming weeks. The retroactive offset filings are due April 15. For TNCs who don't plan to request any retroactive offset, you should continue to submit and remit your quarterly payments, which are due April 15. However, for the TNCs who plan to request retroactive filings, they need to be filed separately. If you plan to request retroactive filings for either quarter 3 or quarter 4 of 2019, I encourage you to submit STD 204 form ASAP to us so we can quickly set up the payment process. If you're requesting retroactive filing for Q1 2020 for some of the counties, you'll need to submit two things. One is to continue to submit and remit the quarterly access fee along with the access fee forms for the counties you're not seeking a retroactive offset. And two, you'll need to file the retroactive offset advice letter for the counties you are seeking a retroactive offset for. Both will be due April 15. Then, assuming CPD approves the advice letter, you'll need to remit, if there's any amount left to remit, after the offset and submit a delayed retroactive offset access fee by May 20th for the counties we approved for retroactive offsets for. If you are seeking a retroactive offset request for all of the counties, you will not need to submit the quarterly access fee on April 15, but you will need to file the retroactive offset advice letter by April 15. Once CPD approves the advice letter, you'll need to remit it. You'll need to remit if there's any amount left to remit after the offset and submit the delayed quarterly access fee by May 20th, reflecting the approved offset amount. Now, if for some reason we deny the advice letter, the TNC will need to submit and remit the delayed quarterly access fee also by May 20th, which is 50 days after the quarter ends as stated in the decision. So you're probably wondering, well, what does the delayed quarterly fee statement look like? And is it different? The answer is yes. So let me quickly show you. There it is. So this retroactive access fee statement, including future offset fee statement, will be posted at the same place where you've been downloading the quarterly fee statements and will be clearly labeled which fee statements are for offsets. The format is similar to the typical quarterly fee statement, except we've added line 6, where you'll need to include the advice letter number granting the offset approval amount, as well as the approved amount authorized in the advice letter. Just to note that most of this information is transposed from page 3. So I would start with page 3 when completing this form. For this page, you'll continue to enter the number of TNC trips completed, the fees collected for the counties you're seeking the offset for. It should auto-calculate. And then you'll need to enter the offset approval amount. One thing to note is the fee statements are now due to TNC access at cpc.ca.gov instead of the transportation programs email you've been using when sending the fee statements. And the email is already on the form, as you can see here. Oops. So that pretty much completes the overview of filing advice letters and supplements. We're going to take a short 5-minute break, and then we'll reconvene at 11 o'clock so that we can continue our presentation to talk about the step-by-step process for filing protest, response, and replies. So I'm going to put you on mute just for 5 minutes, and we'll convene at 11 o'clock. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are now moving to the second part of our presentation, which is the step-by-step process for filing protests, responses, and replies. Before we begin, let's go over some basic information related to protests and responses. So just some key, word definitions here. So protest is a filing filed by a third party testing the advice letter. Response is a letter from a third party supporting the advice letter. And reply is a reply of the TNC to any of the protest or the response. So the advice letter process includes, allows protests and replies and responses specified in General Order 96B. And so there are different grounds for protest. One of them is, for example, if the carrier did not properly serve or did not serve the advice letter at all. So that's one ground. Another ground could be when the relief requested in the advice letter violates statute or commission order, or is not authorized by any commission order. A very common ground could be the analysis, calculations, or data in the advice letter contain material errors or omissions. fourth ground could be relief requested in the advice letter is pending before the commission in another formal proceeding, or the relief requested is unjust or unreasonable or discriminatory to any party or to any party. And so those are the key grounds for protest. Again, you can find more about them specifically in General Rule 7.4 under GO 96B. So file a protest or response within 20 days of the advice letter's submission date. A carrier or the TNC shall reply to each protest within 5 business days after the end of the protest period. The protester cannot reply to the TNC's reply. And most importantly, protests, responses, and replies are not required to be served on the service list for GO 96B. So the first step is preparing the letter of protest or response or reply. Basically, the filing has only 2 components: the letter and any supporting documents that you may have. So the summary form and cover letter, which are required for the original advice letter or any supplemental filing, are not required for protests or responses or replies. So just the letter and the supporting documents. And as I mentioned, you don't need to serve the protest to the service list.
Once all the protest, response, or the reply filing components are complete and ready, the next step is ensuring that documents follow the submission requirements. They should be in a PDF Excel format, follow the correct file name format, email subject format, be PDF-A compliant, and comply with file size and email body content requirements. The first filing requirement depends on the type of protest or response or reply filing. The document should either be 1 or 2 files, either just PDF or PDF and Excel. The second filing requirement is filing naming convention. The 2 files created in step 2.1 must be named following these conventions. So for a protest, for example, with PDF documents, you would name the packet as protest by, then you include the protester's name, TNC name, advice letter number. If you're replying to a protest with PDF documents, you would name the packet as reply to, then you'll include the protester's name, TNC name, advice letter number. If you're responding to an advice letter with PDF documents, you would name the packet as response to, then you'll include responder's name, TNC name, and then the advice letter number. For the third filing requirement, you want to make sure that the PDA packet is PDF-A compliant, just like the advice letter filing. For the fourth filing requirement, the file size requirement is the same as the advice letter.
So the fifth filing requirement is email format. So when you email the protest filing, please use these naming conventions in your email subject. So for protest, it's protest by, protester's name, TNC name, and advice letter number. Reply filing, So indicate it's a reply to, first name, a TNC name, and advice letter number. And same with response filing, a response to funder's name, advice letter number. You are sending your filing via our CPUC's SFTP. Please use the same subject heading in those submissions.
Mute your phone if you're, please mute your phone. We're hearing some background, thank you.
And finally, a sample of the email body that you would send with the filing. So you can create your own language here, but as long as you have the advice letter number and the the advice letter number and also the contact information for a person, just in case we have questions regarding the protest or reply.
The final step of submitting a advice letter is to attach the letter and any supporting documents. Protest response and replies must be emailed to CPED at tncaccess@cpuc.ca.gov and to the appropriate party as shown in the slide. The cutoff time for protest response and replies is 5 p.m. Pacific to be considered filed on the same day. Submissions after 5 p.m. Pacific or on a non-business day will be considered filed the next business day, similar to an advice letter filing. Once filed, there will be an automatic confirmation email from CPED to confirm the receipt of the advice letter.
So just to recap the protest response and reply process. So prepare the letter of protest or response or reply and ensure that they follow filing requirements, and then email them via email or SFTP to CPED and to the carrier for protest or response, or to the protester for a reply. So we hope that this presentation provided you with a clear overview of both the advice letter filing process and the protest filing process. In addition to these slides, the following links will be also helpful as resources to clarify or answer questions related to the filing process. We will also be updating our website to include information about the process and other related information related to the Access for All program. This concludes our presentation. We understand that we covered a lot that wasn't included in the slides, but we will be posting a step-by-step manual on the website in addition to all the required forms and templates, and to help you with the entire process. We thank you for your time, and we now open the floor to questions or any comments.
So I'm just looking over at Cody just to make sure we have any questions coming in that hasn't been answered yet. So just probably wait a few minutes to see if there's any questions that comes in.
I saw, hi, this is Cody from PC. Rochelle, I saw one question from you earlier on in the presentation about rounding. I just wanted to clarify that the data templates provided don't have any rounding. There's no data that's reported as an average. We do ask that aggregated amounts be reported, so totals, but no rounding, no averages.
Wait there. so they can speak because they were muted.
We have a pretty large group on the call today, so we do have everybody muted right now. If you do wish to ask a question right now at this time, if you don't mind just tapping a note into the chat box, that way we know to unmute you. Otherwise, we will just expect that folks will email us questions or contact staff directly at the TNC access at cpuc.ca.gov website. And we are very happy to hear from you. In addition, I believe that there's a way that you can raise your hand through the WebEx. If you're aware of how to do that, then we can recognize you that way. So we will follow up with putting this material on our website, the data templates, guidance, and other useful information about how to file an advice letter or how to participate by filing a protest. We will notify the service list for the TNC access proceeding when those materials become available online. And then, again, we're on hand to assist as specific questions come up. And we kind of look forward to working with you on this process. This will be the first time that an advice letter has been established for this type of program. And so, you know, we're implementing what the commission ordered be done, and we expect that as we undergo this with all of the participants in this process, we will learn some things. So we look forward to hearing from you about how your, you know, submittals are being prepared. Shivani, I saw that question about the data templates. That's something that we can talk about going forward, but in the interest of keeping the filings consistent and recognizing the compressed schedule that folks have to file everything by the 15th, it would be unduly complicated and difficult to revise the templates at this time. But we're interested to chat with you and any other stakeholders as we begin to receive their requests and identify whether there are improvements that we can make to ease the compliance obligation on everybody. All right, well, we're not seeing anything in the chat, so I think we can go ahead and conclude. Anna and Reagan, do you have anything you want to say to wrap us up?
Not really, but we look forward to your filings. Also, April 15th is just around the corner. We will be uploading the quarterly access fee for non-offsets and as well as offsets, hopefully by this end of the week. So you should be seeing that soon. Yeah, thank you for joining us. Reagan, do you have anything else?
No, I think we're ready to go.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for your time, participation.
I'm going to stop recording.